French context. In order to read Fanon in a decolonial way, let's go back to his Greek transgression, that is to say, in becoming Algerian on the Evelyn side. Obviously, the French situation is now very particular because French people, I mean intellectuals, are more interested in Fanon's life than in Fanon's theory. Moreover, many of them think that Fanon revealed his own experience, and that Sartre, for example, built a theory without relation with his own experience as a white man. It's the reason why there is no French theoretical analysis based on Fanon's work. French have to choose the decolonial option, but they don't, and finally we won't. The prejudice is old and strong. There is a side for experience and a side for theory. In other words, there is a border between facts and reason, between black men, women, and white men, women, between colony and la métropole. There is briefly a stumbling block in an epistemological kind of way, an obstacle epistemologique, in France with Fanon studies, even if he remains as a third world hero. In France, there are neither postcolonial studies nor black studies like in the US. Elrich Cleaver, and you know that Elrich Cleaver lived in Algeria in exile. Elrich Cleaver and Angela Davis, the Black Panthers and Muhammad Ali, the struggles for independence, the Third World, and Algiers. When I was young in Algeria, I didn't know that Fanon was also Algerian. I read only Peau Noire, Masque Blanc, and being Algerian was not, for the person I was, a reality, but an ideal. Being Algerian was defined as being one an Arab and two a Muslim. It was the post-colonial time of nationalism. It was the time of national identity policy. It was not the time of the diversity, of acceptation of barbaric people inside the Algerian nation. To my mind, Fanon was elsewhere, somewhere in America, but not in Africa. There was a gap between Mouloud Feraoun, Les Fils Pauvres, Mohamed Dib, La Grande Maison, Kateb Yassine, Le Cadavre Encerclé, for example, and Frantz Fanon. There was an Algerian nationalist corpus of writers who could give us the right way and the right speech. Indeed, Fanon was a thinker. He was not a writer, even his first projects are plays. He dictated all his books. It is now possible to read L'œil noir and Les mains parallèles. He was very young when he wrote them before writing Peau Noire, Masque Blanc in 1952. In Les mains parallèles, I think this title is linked with an old Christian proverb: the right hand must forget what the left hand does. Polyxos, the main character, says, I'm sorry because I did the translation, but in French, arrêtez, ne bougez pas, arrêtez de votre mission la terrible préparation. N'augmentez jamais le cercle où se prend le destin de l'homme. Écoutez-moi, j'ai aujourd'hui, après 2000 ans, le droit de parler. So, in English, stop, don't move, stop preparing your horrendous mission. Don't extend the circle in which human destiny is locked away. Listen to me. Today, after 2,000 years, I had the right to speak. Fanon was really prepared to understand Algerian people, at that time Français musulmans, when French government said that there was no interlocuteur valable, no dialogue whatsoever with those people in the French department of Algeria. Edouard Glissant mentioned Fanon in his two months published in 1993. I just want to read the text in French. It's difficult for me to translate in English. Dans le village militaire, il n'y avait que des gens sagement mariés, on faisait parfois la fête, mais c'était en convenance. La plupart du temps, on restait entre nous les Antillais, tout bonnement par habitude. Tarja nous assure qu'il y a des Antillais, des étudiants qui sont passés du côté des Arabes. Je ne peux pas croire ça. Il faut vraiment du culot. Mais après tout, autant qu'il y en ait 2 ou 3 de l'autre côté. Même, il dit Tarja, on entend des rumeurs là-bas, en bas, dans les régions du côté du Soudan. Un Algérien martiniquais. Il a parcouru pour les Arabes. Il s'appelle Franck Fanon, je crois. For Edouard Glissant, Fanon has crossed the border between French and Arabs in the same time as a traitor for other French West Indians and a resistance fighter for the Algerian cause. Glissant emphasized Fanon's double face, Janus. In ancient Rome, it was Deum Deus, the first one. Janus was the introducing word, the god of doors. He opened the doors of war, but he was peaceful. Janus Bifrons looked both at the past and the future. Edouard Said said that Fanon's whole project is first to eliminate and then to animate the separation between colonizers and colonized, subject and object, in order that what is false, brutalizing, and historically determined about the relationship might become clear, stimulate action, and lead to the overthrow of colonialism itself. Actually, Franck Fanon had a bipolar identity as regards his personal history in his involvement. Black men among white people, French among Algerians, and American in Africa. He was in between. It's a singular kind of exile. It was impossible for him, like Joseph Conrad, for instance, to stay at home with his Martinican fellow countrymen. In his biography, David Macy showed that Fanon moved twice, from Martinique to France and from France to Algeria. Then he went to a lot of other countries and especially to Ghana. What I mean is that Fanon moved out in a material and physical sense, but also in an intellectual and political way. I'm pretty sure that it was one of the most important reasons why Edouard Said was so interested in Fanon's work. Edouard Said grasped in a very clever way that exile, even if it's successful, is always a solitary way with many obstacles, either objective ones or subjective ones. I'm convinced that this kind of experience are part and parcel of the Fanonian invention of the subject. Subjectivation is an internal movement in which thought, mind, and body change without any awareness. It was what ancient Greeks called metamorphosis. When he was in Algeria, Fanon took another name, Umar, which in Arabic means life. This name is not only to be found in the Muslim world, but also in the West Indies, especially in Cuba, and among African Americans. There is no subjectivation without myth and mythology. Discovering colonial and racial subjectivity and going beyond colonial and racial borders are one and the same thing in Fanon's life and in Fanon's books. When Fanon showed the experience of skin under artificial and colonial masks, he discovered the reality of subaltern subjectivity, which is never black or white, which can be reduced to the color of one skin, but in fact, which is determined by being colored or not. Fanon described in a very opposite way what the psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott defined as a false self as opposed to the true self. Donald Winnicott belonged to the same generation as Franck Fanon. He was born in 1920. Then he invented the concept of holding environment. When a human being doesn't grow up in this given environment, he develops a false self instead of a true self. A holding environment is built by the mother, the family, and also the world at large. The false self is a mask of the false persona that constantly seeks to anticipate demands coming from others in order to maintain the relationship. The false self protects the subjectivity from wants and even destructions. But at the same time, it hides the true self, and it's dangerous because it destroys true feelings. The person doesn't feel alive, really, and to him or her, this can't exist. So, a normal, it's a quotation, a normal black child having grown up with a normal family will find himself abnormal from the slightest contact with the white world. In Peau Noire, Masque Blanc, Fanon understood that racial conflict is obviously inscribed in colonial subjectivity. Then Fanon clearly described colonial conflict in the Algerian psyche and enlarged upon psychological and political consequences of what we can call no false self. Au mensonge de la situation coloniale, le colonisé répond par un mensonge égal. Faced with colonial lies, colonized people respond by similar lies. Toute rencontre de l'occupé avec l'occupant est mensonge. Ce n'est pas le sol qui est occupé. Le colonialisme français s'est installé au centre même de l'individu algérien et y a entrepris un travail soutenu de métissage, d'expulsion de soi-même, de mutilation rationnellement poursuivie. Il n'y a pas une indépendance du terrain et une indépendance des personnes. C'est le pays global, son histoire, sa pulsation quotidienne qui sont contestées, défigurées, dans l'espoir d'un définitif anéantissement. Dans ces conditions, la respiration de l'individu est une respiration observée, occupée. Being occupied is quite different from being free. It looks like social death. Occupation leaves scars on the body which has been bodied. Fanon spoke about les noyaux de désespoir cristallisés dans le corps du colonisé. Colonized people are driven to despair. This feeling of despair is inherent in the colonized body. How then? During his consultation at Vidas Hospital, the psychiatrist observed different phenomena. Le malade ne semble pas pouvoir démobiliser ses nerfs. Il est constamment tendu, en attente, entre la vie et la mort. Ainsi que nous le disons, vous voyez, je suis déjà raide comme un mort. People say they did not feel alive but dead because their muscles were horribly tense. That's how we can understand the link between lies, death, and being objectively and subjectively occupied. The muscle replaces the psychological function of the skin. Finally, Fanon unveiled the black skin under the mask in Martinique. He also unveiled the écorché under the Algerian skin. There are the two kinds of split personalities. Broadly speaking, there are the two aspects of Fanon's psychological discoveries. The skin is the internal border between dominated and dominant people, between colonized people and colonizers. One's skin belongs to subjectivity and remains an object, something which is not a property but a social and political surface. Destruction is the heart of the matter. violence too, because the wretched of the earth live in hell. So your prediction of life is not that simple. It's not mechanical. Destruction is not necessarily a rebirth. Fanon also perfectly observed the beginnings of post-colonial society. Subjectively, destruction of an object does not make this object. It's a definition of hell. Political destruction is not psychological destruction. There are ghosts in our lives, especially in these lives are themselves destroyed. The achievement of the process depends on separation from the subjective object. Killing enemies is never enough to kill bad objects. Post-colonial mimetism, and for Fanon, post-colonial false mimetism, like false self, shows the process of separation never ends. Comparing Fanon and Winnicott seems to be paramount because for Winnicott it is generally understood that the reality principle involves the individual in anger and reactive destruction, but my thesis, said Winnicott, is that the destruction plays its part in making the reality, placing the object outside the self. There is a space between the inner and outer world, between people, which is a former space to intimate relationships and creativity. Individual and collective possibilities depend on the experience, which leads to trust and trust. As Fanon said, in all truth, I tell you, my shoulders slipped out of the framework of the world. My feet could no longer feel to the touch of the ground. Without a negre path, without a negre future, it was impossible for me to live my negreness. Not yet white, no longer all the monster black, I was damned. Jean-Paul Sartre had forgotten that the negre suffers in his body quite differently from the white. Certainly, Fanon, and I want to certainly Fanon made intellectual and political heroes, but I prefer to be wrong with Fanon than to be right with Sartre. Because to me, there are things which are more important than others. For instance, Fanon maintained that the Oedipus complex did not exist in Martinique or in non-Western countries. He also stood up for peasantry with Marxist hopes. There is some naivete in Fanon's idealism. He was not the only one. Algerians had strictly no idea of what a government might mean because colonized people were neither gouvernants nor gouvernés. This is the difference between colony and poverty, because the poor are more or less included in self-government. But the main point for me is the great transformation Fanon underwent in the philosophy of the colony. It's something like a revolution because his Manichaeism was the reflection of the turning point he experienced while listening to colonized people, black Martiniquais or Algerians. Then he criticized new governments and the new national bourgeoisie in African countries after their independence. The meaning of independence is not decolonization. Independence is a step in the process of decolonization. It starts with anti-colonial struggle, but doesn't finish with political independence. Colonial representation are deeply rooted in minds and souls on both sides, that of the colonizers and that of colonized people. Fanon was not anti-Sartrien, but he was against Sartre. Edouard Said sympathized with his opinion. In any case, said Said, Fanon is unintelligible without grasping that his work is a response to theoretical elaboration produced by the future of late Western capitalisms, received by the Third World's native intellectual as a culture of oppression and colonial enslavement. The whole of Fanon's oeuvre is his attempt to overcome the obturacy of those very same theoretical elaboration by an act of political will to turn them back against their authors so as to be able, in the phrase he borrows from Césaire, to invent new souls. Inventing new souls is the same as starting over a new history of man. From this point of view, there is no gap between black skin, white mask, and the region of the earth. Thank you.